chat and also in the Wolver chat. So you can access it anytime. This will be your one-stop for all the resources that we have available, including the slides, the code, and also the overview of the session. And then just in case you're interested, we also have a Home Depot virtual booth. If you want to learn what it's like to work at the Home Depot, and if you're interested in our open positions, feel free to check it out. So before we get started, if you would open this link. This link is also available on our GitHub link. So basically it's the Colab version of the tutorial. I'm gonna post it in the Zoom chat real quick here. If you click on that link and open that Colab notebook, and then execute the first 2 cells, which will help you install some of the necessary packages for the second half of the tutorial, because the installation takes quite a while. And then just leave that notebook open and we'll come back to it during the second half. So we'll give everybody a chance to find that link on GitHub if you haven't, or click this link directly from the Zoom chat. We'll also post that link in the Wolver app, so folks who join later can also use it. So we're going to post again the GitHub link in the chat as well for folks who join later. All right, so we're going to get started with our first chapter of the introduction slides. And then Matthew will be presenting for us. So Matthew, you can, stage is yours.
Thanks, Cody, a lot for organizing this talk. And this portion of the talk, I know this is a hands-on tutorial, but there's definitely a lot of people out there that this might be their first exposure to computer vision. So this is just going to be a quick 30-minute introduction of computer vision, but there's going to be some parts too where we'll go into the details. So for people that are longtime practitioners in computer vision, perhaps there's going to be a few more details of a lot of the different techniques that are commonly used. So hopefully this will be a quick 30-minute introduction that could be useful despite, regardless of how strong of if your background is, has a lot of experience with computer vision or you're relatively new to the field. So this talk let me start sharing it. Share screen. Okay. Is everyone able to see the slideshow?
Yep, you're good.
Okay. So this is a kind of a deep dive of computer vision, and even though that this workshop is mainly about segmentation, there's still a lot of different techniques with computer vision that are kind of built on top of segmentation. And there's kind of this whole evolution of computer vision where it wasn't really that successful before 2012. I mean, it still was doing pretty well with a lot of the traditional techniques, but it didn't really start taking off with some really high accuracy scores, 95% or higher, until deep learning was introduced. And deep learning is using a lot of neural networks, but neural networks were kind of invented in the 1980s, but they really started to take off when the GPUs became a lot more powerful, where you could do a lot more matrix computations at the same time. And a lot of these GPUs, a lot of the computers that came out that were using CPUs, they had 8 cores or 12 cores. And then these GPUs were coming out with these tiny processors that had, thousands of cores. And the deep learning and neural networks are really able to utilize those GPUs and really be able to speed up computation and be able to learn a lot faster. And that's when deep learning really started to take off and really kind of dethrone a lot of the traditional techniques. So a lot of the things, and this PowerPoint, this is going to be an introduction to computer vision, but it covers a lot of different techniques. So we wanted to try to share that for a lot of the attendees at KDD, even though we're giving a very long, comprehensive, hands-on tutorial with segmentation. This PowerPoint is going to cover all of computer vision with the traditional techniques, and then also deep learning techniques with classification, object detection, as well as segmentation, and then the generative models. And this is only going to be around a 30-minute talk, but I'm going to kind of gloss over each of those concepts, and then you can go into this PowerPoint in your own time and kind of read more about the details of each topic. And I also have all the references are there with footnotes, and you can just click on it and it'll take you straight to the paper or straight to the blog to get even more details. So you can learn, go as deep as you want to. These are a lot of the books. I found that the Packet Pug books, a lot of times they have a huge quantity, and it's almost like there's too many of them. And kind of looking through, these are the ones that I found that really do a great job explaining computer vision. Some of them kind of are a little bit too brief in their explanations, or they try to cover too much. And these do have some really good authors and really good. They really dive into the details really well, and a lot of the descriptions are referenced with these books in this PowerPoint. So, and also the 3 most common packages, or 4 most common packages that we use in computer vision are OpenCV, TensorFlow, Keras, and PyTorch. So just to kind of talk about traditional machine vision, usually this is kind of before 2012, where you would capture an image, you would extract features from it, and then you might have some sort of rules like, is the contrast this level, is the threshold this level, and then you would use those rules to make predictions. So it was a lot of like feature extraction with traditional machine learning with computer vision. And here's just a lot of different feature descriptors that were used to kind of get more details about the images to be able to feed in to machine learning algorithms. So you might, use wavelet transforms or Gabor filters, color histograms, and then that would create these feature descriptors to help describe the image better and create certain key points on the image. And then you would feed that into machine learning, and you would get pretty good accuracy. You would get 70 or 80% accuracy usually. And then what ended up happening was in 2012, out of Hinton's group, they decided to apply neural networks to computer vision. And there's this annual competition, ImageNet, that was trying to classify millions of images into 1,000 different categories. And they only would usually get around 70 or 80%. And then the minute this deep learning approach, where they created this neural network, was entered in the competition in 2012, it was incredible. I think they got it in 90% accuracy. I'll look at the screenshot, which gives accuracy, but you can kind of see that this is kind of the evolution of neural networks. and how 2012 is really when things started to take off. But a lot of these neural networks techniques were being invented much longer, a longer period ago, from the 60s. And here you can see this is the top the error rate, and you can see what a drop it goes from human design features to deep learning. ILSVRC is the ImageNet competition. So this is, I'm going to quickly gloss through this because I know we want to have a lot of time for the hands-on tutorial, but here's just a lot of different techniques, the traditional techniques that were really popular before 2012. This is, when you're applying noise to images using mean and median filters. You can see how well it denoises images based on the type of noise. There's a lot of different types of noises that you typically see. Classifying textures, they use this equation to create these Gabor filters. And when you apply those filters against these textures, it can classify them pretty well. Recognize as bricks, recognize as stones. So a lot of these, feature descriptors, these traditional techniques where you're kind of throwing these filters against images with certain equations, can do okay, definitely better than a rule-based method. This is a histogram of gradients where you're creating, gradients of how the colors change around the whole image, and then you run a classifier against it. And then you can use that with logistic regression, and then you predict, and you can see how it can do pretty well. This image right here, it recognizes piano as a rhino. It recognized the elephant as a rhino. So it doesn't do that bad. It recognizes a pizza as a brain, but it recognizes this sunflower as a sunflower. So, this is a relatively simple approach where you just do histogram of gradients and then flatten that into a vector and send it to logistic regression. But, this was the kind of the state of the art techniques before 2012, and it still got the job done. And if you were doing some pre-processing, it could definitely help things out rather than doing it manually. This is another kind of feature descriptor that tries to, you can kind of see how this is a little bit more advanced because it's scale invariant. So right here, it would detect this as an edge, but if you, zoom this in, you would see that it would no longer detect this as an edge because you're kind of zooming in and it detects the edges in the wrong place. So it kind of does this Laplacian of Gaussians to try to detect the edges a lot better, applying this Gaussian filter around the images. This is SIFT, which is another feature descriptor. And there's more advanced methods, SURF, and you can kind of see how it's detecting all these different areas in the image. And this could be used for image similarity, trying to see how using these techniques, SIFT and SURF, there's different descriptors. I don't want to spend too much time on the traditional techniques, but feel free to use this PowerPoint as a reference. Fast and brief are more accurate than SIFT and SURF. And they just use more advanced methods. Feel free to check out the PowerPoint to read more about them. Orb is kind of like a combination of using fast and brief together. That gets even a little bit of a stronger method. And you can kind of see how it's able to recognize the NASA logo pretty well in the area. There's a little bit of an error here with this area, this portion, but it still does a pretty good job. And this is without using any deep learning, without using any neural networks. This is for object detection, where it creates these edge features and line features, and it's able to recognize where the eye is. And they have like different features for each area of the face to kind of recognize where the eye is, where the mouth is. So all in all, with the traditional techniques, they're pretty good. However, everything kind of took off in 2012, where you're just getting really incredible accuracies. And it kind of started off with convolutional neural networks. And those were just kind of used for classification. You know, is this a mushroom? Is this a plane, an airplane, a bird? And convolutional neural networks just did incredibly well with classification, but then they also started to find out that they could be used in other areas for object detection, where the car is in the photo, where the horse is in the photo. And then you could even take it to the next level, and this is what this talk will be talking about, which is segmentation, where you're not just detecting where the object is in the image, but you're actually creating an entire segmented outline of the object, which can be, you know, really helpful, especially for image processing. You know, if you want to find, let's say, a similar chair in a photo, and there's all this noise, and it's a chair in a living room, you can use segmentation to extract the chair out of the photo perfectly. And these are generative models. We're actually creating synthetic images with artificial intelligence. So you can see how realistic these horses look, but it actually started with this photo of zebras, and it was able to use AI to realistically change this from zebras to horses. And it can do the opposite, to go from horse to a zebra. And there's a lot of examples of, you know, you even see deep fakes now with videos, and they're getting more and more advanced, where you can't even tell the difference of whether this is a realistic photo or if it was synthetically generated or not. We won't talk about generative models, but, you know, that's all in the PowerPoint. So feel free to kind of read in your own time the PowerPoint with examples of generative models. It also has good references to survey papers and blogs. So this is kind of like a complete deep dive of computer vision. You can kind of see with convolutional neural networks how much better the accuracy has gotten, you know, from 2.3% error rate. And this is everything pre-2012 is a lot higher error rate. And the first you know, neural network went down to 16%, and then it's gone even more so. So this is AlexNet. This was the first neural network, and they used a lot of different approaches too with neural networks, which you can see all the different operations with a convolution, max pooling, normalization, and then at the very end is where the fully connected networks are. So this is probably maybe, if we were going to go through the whole talk, this would probably take about 8 hours to go through this whole, you know, whole PowerPoint. And I'm trying to just give a quick overview so we can spend more time for the hands-on tutorials. But just to quickly, you know, show what these different operations are. This is a fully connected network. And this is where every single node is connected to every other node and multiplied with certain weights. And that's kind of the final layers that are kind of used to classify what the object is. But initially, what you're doing is you're kind of using these convolutions where you have these different weights and filters that are learned, and you're kind of going up and down the image, and it's kind of creating a lower representation of that image. But even though this is a 3x3 representation of an original 7x7 image, since you're convolving the whole image, there's a lot of information in here. And if we go back, you can kind of see how the features that are learned with the first operations are kind of these low-level features, and as you go later, there are a lot of high-level features. So this is kind of what a convolution is, and they do this over and over again, where you kind of see the sequence where you do a convolution, then you have a non-linear activation, and then you do pooling, which I'll show. So it's kind of that back and forth between these different operations, and all these operations, when you tie them together, it creates an incredibly high accuracy score. So this is pooling, where you do a max pooling, and you can see how this is kind of the max value in each of these squares here. So this is a little bit different than a convolution. So you have kind of these three operations here: a fully connected layer, convolutional layer, and a pooling layer. This is one of the more advanced architectures that used even more convolutions than that original AlexNet, which is VGG16. ResNet was kind of the first approach where you can have tons of convolutions. You're kind of having this vanishing gradient problem where so much information was lost when you had so many layers that you would tie them together. So the ResNet idea created these skip connections. So it would go through the entire network when it's needed, but it would learn when to actually leverage these skip connections. And I think ResNet goes up to 100 different layers, and VGG16 only has around 16 layers. Inception was kind of the next iteration, and sometimes they tie these together where you see a lot of times when you're downloading networks, it'll say like Inception ResNet, because it's kind of both of these ideas where Inception is kind of pretty good for indecisive people where you're not sure if you should do a 3x3 or a 5x5 or 3x3. And if you apply all those operations to concatenate it, it's really expensive. So what you can do is you insert a 1x1 before, and then you do a 3x3. And by doing a 1x1, you kind of reduce the size of this previous layer. So then when you do all four of these operations, it might have been a very large layer here, you know, maybe like a 256 by 256 by, you know, by 20. But if you do the inception with this 1x1, it could bring it down to like 256 by 256 by 10 or by 5. And you don't lose all the information because you're still applying the 1x1 to the original layer. So it reduces a lot of computation. Exception is even another advancement of inception, where instead of doing a 1x1 on the entire previous layer, you kind of just do it on each slice of that layer, and that if you do all the equations, it actually takes up even less computation. So I mean, if you kind of imagine it this way, like if you're doing a computation on like something a 1024 by 1024 image with 3 colors, RGB, that's 1024 by 1024 by 3, and then if you're using a filter that's a 3x3x3 on that image, you know, that's a lot of computations where you have to convolve on all 3 of those RGB layers. And a lot of these layers, you know, as you get later on, they might have, you know, 50 slices or 60 slices. So to do exception, it's a lot more efficient because you're not performing a convolution on every single slice, like on a 1024 by 1024 by 3. You don't do the convolution on every single slice there. You just do it on one slice at a time. You can kind of see what I'm talking about. It's a little bit hard. It would be a little bit easier to visualize with like an animation, but you see how when you're doing this convolution, you're doing it on the whole previous layer, but with exception, you do it on each slice of that layer, and then apply the filters and then put it together later. And that ends up being a lot less computation. And it beats inception slightly, even though it has less computation. And then when you have even more classes, when you're trying to classify around 20,000 classes, that really, you really get an advantage there. And especially when you do even more steps. DenseNet is kind of like ResNet, but instead of doing skip connections, you kind of use all the information from the previous layers. So when I'm looking at this X3 layer here, you can kind of see how there's skip connections from, you know, all 3 previous layers. And that's, you know, that you can see how much better it does than ResNet. So there's a lot of these different creative ideas for convolution to increase the classification. So, and you can kind of see all the different computational costs with each layer, how even though, you know, with VGG16, like how much more computation it takes, but still Inception and ResNet, they take less computation and have even higher accuracy. So it's a pretty interesting graph here. I'm not going to talk about this, but this is just, you know, different methods on how to learn. Stochastic gradient descent kind of bounces around a little bit too much. So there's all these different creative ways to try to get to the optimal values for the weights without, you know, being too sensitive to your current gradients. Atom is really popular these days, but there's a lot of different optimization algorithms, and you can kind of see how they learn differently, how some are more sensitive and others kind of get to the optimum faster. You know, like you kind of look at a delta, how it doesn't get to the best optimum faster, but it gets there really quick. And then there's other ones like RMS prop that, you know, isn't too sensitive and gets stuck. It doesn't get stuck in these local optimums as much. So that's it with classification. I think I'm running a little behind. I'm going to try to go through object detection pretty quickly and then get to segmentation. So object detection is kind of, you know, using these, you can choose, you know, these different convolutional neural networks to detect objects, but there's also a lot to do with the algorithm that's kind of like on top of that. And you can kind of see how, you know, 2012 is when AlexNet comes out, and how there's all these different, you know, types of detectors from 2012 on for object detection. But it's kind of this split of 1 stage and 2 stage. And what that means is there's 2 stages slower, but it's usually more accurate, where you kind of have this proposal of, you know, where the candidate bounding boxes should be. So you kind of have this separate region proposal network of, you know, determining where we should put these candidate bounding boxes to test if there's an object there. And then after you know, use that region proposal network, then you try to learn, you know, is this a good bounding box? Is there actually the right object in here? Is there no object in here? So you're kind of 2 stage, you're kind of learning 2 separate things. 1 stage is you go straight to the learning of whether this object is, you know, it's a lot faster, and you have this whole backbone network where you're trying to learn, you know, with the bounding boxes, is there an object there or not? But the issue is you don't have any region proposal network. So a lot of times you might have so many different candidate bounding boxes that it can cause some issues, because you kind of create this grid of images with all these boxes, and sometimes depending on how big the grid is, it might not recognize, you know, small objects that well, or there might be 2 or 3 objects in this, you know, tiny, in the way you slice up a grid, and it might make some errors, but it's a lot faster because you don't have a region proposal network. For evaluation, this is just kind of average precision is pretty common, but what it does is it says, you know, based on how sensitive the confidence is of the objects you find, your recall is going to get higher, but your precision will get lower. If you say, okay, I'll accept object predictions that were 70% confident or 60% confident, then your recall, you recognize a lot, but your precision goes lower. So the average precision just kind of tests all these confidence levels, and you can just, you know, sum under that graph. And then you get your average precision, and you do that for every single category, and that's how you get the mean average precision. That's where that MAP comes from, and you can kind of see all the different accuracy improvements with object detection, and then also depending on what convolutional neural network you choose. you can see how there's different accuracies too. So you have a different meta architecture. So SSD is a 1-stage and faster RCN is a 2-stage, but that's not what's only important. You know, your feature extractor, your convolutional neural network might be VGG16 or ResNet or Inception. So you can kind of see how these all differ based on the choices you make. So I'm not going to talk too much about this because I'm running out of time, but we have YOLO, which is a very popular 1-stage network. And this just, you know, like I was saying before, creates an entire grid. And then it tries to create all these bounding boxes in the grid. And then it sends that through a convolutional neural network. These are just the equations that you look through. And it kind of, you know, learns like the deltas of where the anchor boxes should be. So there's not really, you know, as much like control of these candidate bounding boxes. You know, they have a certain grid and they create these bounding boxes, and then you know, run that through a convolutional neural network. You know, there's different versions of YOLO where they get better at determining, you know, what the types of bounding boxes there should be, where they try to get a little bit smarter without using a region proposal network. And then there's also YOLO version 3 as well. Feel free to, you know, read about those, about the differences. YOLO version 3 is getting really good. I think they're actually up to version 4, or there's some controversy with version 5 because the author of version of YOLO retired, but then they kind of these new authors try to create another iteration, and it's getting a pretty good accuracy, but it's not done by the original author. So they're like, should this really be YOLO version 5 or not? So also another, yeah, and this is where you can just see a little bit of the difference, where it takes, you know, different scales, and there's a lot of creative things they do with YOLO version 3. With SSD, this is a little bit different than YOLO, where they actually take all the different convolutions from VGG16 and they also add some extra feature layers. So they don't just kind of use a grid and then create these bounding boxes. They use the different feature maps from all these convolutions to make predictions, and then they have different aspect ratios and different scales for each feature map. And you can kind of see how each feature map from these different layers, you know, are better for, so the smaller feature maps are better for recognizing the larger objects, and the larger layers are better for recognizing these smaller objects. And they get really creative the way they, you know, create all these candidate bounding boxes. And remember, this is no region proposal network. So this is where I'm going to talk a little bit more about the 2-stage networks. So RCNN was kind of the first version, and it did pretty well, but you know, and it used this thing called selective search, where it used a lot of those feature descriptors that I was kind of talking about before. But you know, the problem was that it was so slow, and even though the selective search was pretty neat, I was able to create the candidate bounding boxes. It didn't really, one of the issues was it would then send this, you know, to a convolutional neural network and classify the regions. But these convolutional neural networks always took a 224 by 224 image. So you had to create this warped region, and that was hurting the accuracy. And it was also slower because for each of these region proposals, which is 2000, you would send it through a CNN. So you would send that, you know, 2000, you would use a CNN 2000 times. So you had warped regions, and it was just slower. But you know, this is one of the first object detection methods, and it was really creative, and it did pretty well. And then it would use support vector machines to do the classification. Then the next iteration, they just got a lot smarter with a fast RCNN, where instead of you know, they still would use the same region proposals with that selective search, but then what they did was they would once they would only run a convolutional neural network once, and that would create this feature map. And what was cool about that feature map is they would have ways of saying, okay, you know, the region proposal is right here to detect the head. The feature map is smaller, so if it's, you know, at a ratio of 16:1, I should figure out exactly where where in the feature map that head is. And what's also cool is you don't have to warp the region. So let's say this is a 1024 by 1024 image. You scale this up, you know, or a different aspect ratio, maybe 1024 by 768. The feature map would change, but the issue was that what these CNNs, you know, when you're doing a convolution, it doesn't care how big the image is. You know, if I can't go back to the original image, but you kind of saw how the convolution kind of rotated around the image. It didn't really have to be 224 by 224, so you don't have to do any scaling or warping. And then it creates a feature map. And then what it does is it does this thing called ROI pooling, where it can divide up the image into the feature map, and then it just creates, you know, ROI pooling, kind of like where it would take a max. Let's say, I think FastRCNN is 7 by 7 ROI pooling. So this is a 2 by 2, but it would create a 7 by 7 of all these numbers of taking the max. But no matter how big this feature map was, if this region of this feature map was, you know, really wide or really tall, you can still slice it up 7 by 7 and then take a max pool. So what's cool about that is you didn't have to do any warping like you had to do in the RCNN, which was really awesome. You just could, you know, preserve the originality of the image. Then there's faster RCNN, which got, you know, really creative, where you didn't have to use a selective search that used like feature descriptors like SIFT that I mentioned earlier. It creates a whole region proposal network. So there's no selective search at all. And this does, you know, even better, where it kind of creates this, you know, sliding window and of these different aspect ratios, kind of similar to what you saw with SSD, with these different aspect ratios. And in doing that sliding window, it would say, okay, are these different anchor boxes, when we do a convolution against this with the region proposal network, it would learn, are these good anchor boxes for the sliding windows? Is this where the actual regions should be? So the CNN would kind of learn what weights to apply, where the good boxes should be and where the bad boxes should be. So it had this whole, it's kind of hard to explain, but you know, feel free to read it in your own time. But basically, you have a sliding window against the original image, and you have these candidate anchor boxes with different sizes and different sizes and aspect ratios. And then it would learn whether these candidate boxes, based on this sliding window and the weights that are applied, whether these are good candidate boxes. So you basically had the CNN to learn the weights of where the region proposals should be. So that's what the region proposal network is. And then everything after that is essentially the same as fast RCNNs. But this is a lot faster. You don't have to use selective search, and the accuracy is higher. So that's you know, faster RCNN. I'm running short on time. This is a mask RCNN, which is we're going to be talking more about in this lecture. And mask RCNN, if I this is just an example of different all the different, you know, methods of object detection as before. So for object segmentation, lots of different approaches here too. I don't have time to go over all of them, but you know, this was kind of the first approach, fully convolutional neural networks, and this is where you're kind of upsampling, where you use a CNN and then you upsample to learn, you know, where the segmentation is, and you know, you kind of do these. They have different names for it, like dilated convolution, transposed convolution. It's not a deconvolution per se, because they're not like, it's not an inverse of the convolution. It's just learning the right weights to upsample. And it does, you know, interesting things about where it's upsampling from all these different layers. So sometimes you have to do 32 times upsampling, other times, depending on the layer, 16 times, and then it concatenates them together. And doing that, you know, if you just use the 32 times upsample, you can see how it doesn't do that well. But when you do the 8 times upsampling and also concatenate that with the 32 times, you get much better accuracy. And that's essentially what a mask RCNN is really faster RCNN plus FCN, where you get the candidate bound, you detect where the object is in the image with faster RCNN, and then you run this FCN network, and then you get the segmentation. One of the only differences with mask RCNN and faster RCNN is instead of doing a ROI pool, it uses this thing called a ROI align. And what's better about that is notice when you're using the convolution, it creates an image of smaller size. It creates a feature map of smaller size. So you're trying to figure out, you know, if you're trying to recognize if there's an object right here and you're using the feature map to recognize it, it's not going to do that well when you're leveraging this for segmentation, because let's say this is, you know, 8 by 1, something like that. You're getting these decimals of where the location should be. And that's not really, that doesn't really matter to kind of round off for object detection. But for segmentation, you want to be really exact of where to start testing the region of the feature map. So, so what it basically does is ROI align. It kind of interpolates the difference. So when you divide it by 16, you're interpolating the difference where, let's say, you know, this feature map, that value in this corner here is 88 or something like that. When you're interpolating what's kind of around the regions, since this wasn't an exact 16 by 1, because you have these decimals of the XY location, you interpolate the surrounding areas, and you'll get a little bit of a different pixel value. And that definitely improves things a lot with ROI align. Some other segmentation methods are UNet, and you know, feel free to read about these in your own time. Cody, I think I went a little bit over. You know, we have Deep Lab, and there's also Deep Lab version 3 and version 3 plus. Lots of really interesting things with a lot of this evolution. Mask RCNN does do well, and we're going to do a hands-on tutorial with using Mask RCNN. But there's also, you know, references in this PowerPoint with more segmentation techniques. And you can kind of see FCN was that first approach, and you can see how their IOU was around 65%. And Deep Lab, which is one of the more state-of-the-art techniques, you can see how much higher it gets. This gets all the way up to 81%. And then there's even, you know, more advanced approaches. Deep Lab V3 Plus, which is also referenced here, you can see how that's, you know, a state-of-the-art for the Pascal data set. So it also depends on the data set you're using. You know, right here, Deep Lab is a little bit lower. That's version 3's not the highest. You know, they have these other techniques that are a little bit higher. But it's a really exciting field. You know, there is a review paper of all the segmentation techniques if you want to learn more about them. You know, these are just generative models creating synthetic images. So we are going to share this PowerPoint. There's also a review paper of all the different types of generative models and how they work, how you're creating these synthetic images. Only thing I want to show about generative models is you can see how much better it's getting from 2014 to 2018. These are all fake images that are created synthetically. Unless you want me to dive a little bit deeper, Cody, I feel bad that I might have gone a little bit over. I don't want to go.
It's totally fine. So thanks for presenting such a great, clear presentation. So everyone, if you're interested, please feel free to follow up in the Zoom chat, and Matthew, we had a couple of questions just now, and we were able to answer them. But feel free to ask more questions in the Zoom chat, and Matthew, you can follow up with them in the chat. And you can also download the slides from our main GitHub page. It's called Chapter 1 Slides. If you should be able to find it pretty easily. All right, so now we'll go on to the hands-on session, and we'll be starting with Osama. Stage is yours.
Cool. Hey everyone, my name is Osama Sakhi. Let me see if I can get the screen share going. Okay, is everybody able to see my screen? Okay, cool. All right, hey everyone, my name is Osama. I will be leading the first part of our interactive tutorial, and I'll be covering the post-processing stage of the pipeline. I'll explain what that does in just a second, but I want to first highlight the repository. Y'all should see the link in the Zoom chat, and this is kind of where everything is housed that we'll be using. So if you follow along with the README, you'll find some instructions on how to actually download the repository. You'll need the Git client for that. Again, we'll also specify that we have 2 different versions of the tutorial. So the part of the tutorial that I'm showing is part of the Jupyter notebook only version, so you'll be able to run this on your machine. And the next chapters will be on Google Colab, so you won't need a GPU for that portion, and you will not need a GPU for this portion. And then one thing that I want to point out is if you are following along on your own right now, which you should totally be able to do, you can go ahead and download the full AD 20K dataset. And again, I'll explain exactly what we're doing in this pipeline. But if you go ahead and run that now, you should be able to follow along pretty quickly. So again, we'll be going through the tutorial. And you've already seen chapter 1, which is the introduction, those slides that Matthew just presented. So now we're going to move on to pre-processing. And since this requires running code, and you don't have to run it right now, but in case you are, you would have to follow these instructions here to set up your Miniconda environment. Miniconda is just a package manager for Python. It allows us to all have the same consistent packages installed without any issues. So whether you're on Windows, Mac OS, Linux, as long as you get these packages installed, you should be fine. And then we'll be running what's called a Jupyter notebook. I hope everybody's familiar with it, but in case you're not, you'll see what that looks like in just a second. It's an interactive Python session, is what you should think of it. So I think the best way to understand what we're actually trying to accomplish in this section is to actually see the AD 20K dataset. So let me go ahead and show that now. Hopefully the screen share is still working. This is the AD 20K dataset that you'll have once you download it from the zipped repository. So if you go in, you'll see a folder called images. We'll go there. Then you'll see 2 different partitions of the dataset for training and then for validation or testing. So I'll go into validation. It's organized alphabetically. So we're going to go ahead and go into B. And you'll see a number of scene names. So I'm actually looking for bedrooms. Yeah, so there are bedrooms here. And then you'll see the 2 images that I've pulled up here, which are example number, many zeros, and then 117, and then the segmentation for that. So like you've already seen by now, segmentation is a pixel by pixel classification of an image. So all of the pixels belonging to this chair or armchair are given the same one color. The pillow is given a different color. The door is given a different color, and so on. And so visually, this is great. But as you just saw, as I was going through the data set, there are a ton of scenes. And maybe for your particular use case, not all of these scenes are relevant. And you know, it can be problematic to give a machine learning model, maybe not the most sophisticated model, all this extra data, and you only really care about certain scenes like bedrooms. So what we're going to do in this section is we're going to take the full AD 20K data set. We're going to select the particular scenes we're interested in. We're also going to select the labels that we're interested in. So remember, the full AD 20K data set has somewhere around like 1,000 different types of scenes and 3,000 plus labels. And not every label may be meaningful to you. So for our use cases, we're going to be reducing it down to bedroom or bedroom-like scenes, like hotel rooms, dorm rooms, bedrooms. and we're going to select a small number of labels that we're particularly interested in. You may be interested in chairs and lamps and dressers and doors, but maybe not plants, maybe not vents. So you'll see what that looks like in just a second. So part of this pre-processing pipeline is we want to create a subset of the AD20K data set. And again, that's just so we can narrow down the scenes and the objects we care about. And then on top of that, what we're going to do is we're going to convert into the COCO and Pascal VOC dataset formats. So you'll see what those formats look like as we go through this tutorial. But one thing to keep in mind is those are two very prominent, very popular datasets. So if you find segmentation frameworks or segmentation code repositories, they typically support one of those two because they're that popular. AD20K, on the other hand, has a lot of complexity with it. It's not as easy as those two data sets off the shelf. Sometimes you need some pre-processing, and there are other subsets of the AD20K data set publicly available. One is called the Scene Parsing Challenge, which reduces it down to just 150 that the researchers selected. But here, you're going to be able to select which ones you want. You're going to be able to select the scenes that you want. And I hope that by the end of this, it'll be very clear why we're doing this. And as we move on to chapter 3 and 4, you'll see how useful it is to have something in a consistent format. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to the code repository. So again, assuming you've already downloaded this, assuming you've already gone through these installation instructions, you can start running the notebook. So I have my terminal over here. I'm in the tutorial directory, so I see chapter 2, post-processing, pre-processing, excuse me. And I'm gonna go ahead and run Jupyter Notebook. So if you have not seen a Jupyter Notebook before, it's just a different kind of Python interface. And we will go into chapter 2, pre-processing, and I'll pull up the pre-processing and pre-processing-VOC notebooks. Let me see if I can move this. It's blocking my screen. All right, cool. So this first notebook, we're going to be converting into the COCO format. And in the second notebook, we're going to be converting into the VOC format. And I've written a good bit of conversion code that we're going to dive into in a little bit. But I just want to point out what we'll need to make this happen. So I can, if you haven't used Notebook before, you can execute cells using the run button, or you can hit Shift Enter. So I'm just importing everything that I'll be needing. This conversion script is something that our team wrote, and I'll show you kind of what that's doing under the hood in just a second. So to accomplish this conversion to COCO, we're going to need a couple different things. Number one, we're going to need the location of the full unzipped AD20K dataset, which if you follow the two readmes that I pointed out, you'll have this already. The next thing that we'll need is a destination. So we're going to save all of our exported converted dataset to bedroom scenes _ COCO here in the dataset folder. And now we get to the two things that I mentioned that we need. Number one, we need to figure out which scenes we're interested in. So like I said, we're going to train a model to recognize certain things that you might find within a bedroom. So we figured the scenes that would be relevant would be bedroom, child's room, dorm room, hotel room. There might be more that are relevant, but for now, we'll just stick with these. And what this is doing is actually using keywords in the file name. So if you go back here, remember that we went into the bedroom folder and then we got this image, right? That means if you start at the very top of the dataset directory, if you start at the AD20K data set directory, the full name of the file from that point includes the letter, includes the scene name, and then includes the actual file name. So if we query by certain keywords, we can basically look at the full file name for each of these images, and we can say, if it has bedroom in it, we want to keep it. If it has child's room in it, we want to keep it. And similarly, we can actually choose to reject based on certain keywords. So it might not be relevant for this particular example that we're going by, but there are certain scenes that have an indoor version and an outdoor version. So parking garages, there is an indoor example and an outdoor example. For building, there's an indoor and an outdoor variant. So it's useful to be able to specify what you don't want to see as well from just the file names. And then lastly, we have some groupings of label names. So there are 3,000 or so labels within the AD20K dataset. If you go into the chapter 2 folder, you'll actually see all AD20K labels.txt. And this is a line-by-line list of some of the labels. So each line is one singular label. They might have different things composing that. So dish, dish aerial, dish antenna, saucer, that might all be one particular class, for example. So what we did here is we actually created, in each line, this is called a tuple, by the way. I'm not sure if everybody's very familiar with Python, but each of these lines contains a tuple. So the parentheses contains different labels. And so we may have multiple, and in that case, what we're doing is we're specifying we want to combine. So you'll see here that door, door frame, door case, and double door in the AD20K dataset are considered multiple classes. And for our use cases, we'd like to just combine those three into one. So this is about 15 classes here that may be composed of several different classes or labels internally. And that's totally fine. That's something that we want to support. For example, we may not care if it's a bed post, a blanket, or a headboard. We may want to treat it all as the same. And so that's what this, that's what we can do here with the way we've designed things. So you'll just run that cell here. And then lastly, we'll run this cell. And this is a function that I've got in the conversion.py script, which we'll go through in just a second. I'm not going to run this here because I don't want it to overwrite the data because I want to be able to show the next thing. But if you run this cell, it'll show the exact output as I have here. So as it goes through, it'll kind of log how far it's gotten. It'll tell you where it's stored certain key files. And it takes about 6 minutes. So I just don't want to run it here to slow down the next part. And let me just go ahead and show you what the segmentations look like now that we've gone ahead and taken care of them. So this is some code that I've written to just visualize using some of the tools in PyCoco tools, which is by the Coco team. So if we just step through these, we'll actually be telling it, you look at the training partition, load in the annotations. So we'll talk about the Coco format a little bit more detailed in just a second. But we're loading everything from the annotation files in the Coco, in the subset of the AD20K dataset that we've converted to Coco. And here I just have a function that'll just randomly display a sample. So I'll run a couple different versions. I'll run this in a couple different cells, and it'll randomly pick an image, and it'll color on top of that image based on different class. So you can see this wall here is purple. It's not the best, but this floor is a slightly different shade of purple. The bed, for the most part, is this greenish tint. I think the yellow corresponds to a nightstand. And you'll see that that kind of effect happens in all of these scenes. So unfortunately, there's no legend within this particular visualization. We'll have a better one in the VOC version. But at a high level, all we did is specify these few things. Where we have the AD20K dataset, where we want to store our generated dataset, some things about the scenes, which ones we want, which ones we definitely do not want. And then lastly, the label groupings that we want to use. So instead of the full 3,000 that AD20K has, or instead of the full 80 or so that, that Coco has, we'll now have these 15 or so labels as our true labels. And then when we go to training, we can train on these 15 labels, which is a lot easier than having a model learn 3,000 different labels. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over to the VOC side, and then we'll go in and explore the code and see what's going on under the hood. Because I know, obviously, I abstracted away a lot just by giving you this function. So with VOC, it's very similar. I'm providing all of the same parameters that I provided before. Nothing has changed between these two, just the file, the destination name has changed. That way I saved to a different folder. So very similarly, I've written a convert to VOC, which we'll dive into in just a second. And when you run that, it takes a little bit longer, but it'll store all of these things exactly where it says. And I also have another little thing called a label map, and that's just for us to be able to track exactly what each the text label and the numerical label have to match together. So this is for us to be able to match the two together. And again, you can run that on your own. That's totally fine. Since I already have it, I just want to show the visualization, and then we can kind of dive into the code. So very similarly, just like with the Cocoa version, I'm reading in from a certain location. There's a partition file that kind of contains all of the instance names, and I'm just going to randomly sample from those. So I'll show a random sample here, and you can kind of see the visualizations is slightly different from what we had down here for Cocoa. The visualization tool is different, but under the hood, everything is the same. So you'll see that background is basically anything that we didn't specify just immediately goes to background. You'll see a headboard, and the full name of the class has been chopped off, by the way. So this is only the first 10 or so letters. So you'll see floor, flooring, headboard. As you'll remember, we combined with bed, bedpost. So all of these are combined into the bed. We have pillow as like a separate class. So you'll see that here. There's wall. What is this? It's a picture frame on the wall. You'll see that for these other examples as well. So remember, we didn't specify person or people as a class, so they go into the ignore category. We didn't put, maybe this is a desk, maybe this is something else. We didn't put this into our list of labels, so it's been ignored here as well. And I think you guys get the idea. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna shift over, and I'm actually gonna show the conversion code, and I'm gonna talk a little bit more in more fine-grained detail. What are the differences between the Cocoa format and the VOC format? So let me start with the VOC format because I think it's a little bit more approachable. So I have a script called conversion.py that I've been running to get all these things. So I have a lot of different functions. I don't think we need to get through all of them necessarily, but I'll go over them really quickly. So the filter AD 20K dataset just gives us a list of the file names that match the keywords we wanted and do not have any matches for the reject keywords. So this is how we filter out file names by scene, and this is how we'll know which samples to keep and which samples to ignore for our subset. We can get the label mapping based on the label groupings that we provided here earlier. So we call that want labels. So this is a list of tuples, and all this function is doing is actually just giving us a mapping of the old text label to the new one, and vice versa. So we know that we combine bed, bedpost, and headboard into one class. So we'll have that mapping as a Python dictionary, which is similar to JSON if you've seen that. We'll have these back and forth mappings just so we can kind of do some of the things we'll need to do to make everything work out. We have a, this is just for our visualization, so I'm going to skip over that. Now we get to the actual VOC related contents. So the first thing that we do is we take our mapping of, here is the old label ID and here's the new label ID. So again, these are the text representations of our labels or our classes. So for example, let's go back to the AD20K dataset. So here in the segmentation, each of these colors corresponds to a different label, right? Like this may, like the blue here may correspond to an armchair label. Now, because you cannot encode text in the image itself, you'll just numerically represent chair with a label, let's say 1. You'll represent door with another numerical label, let's say 2. So there's a mapping that we want from the original AD20K labelings to the new converted labelings that we'll be using. So bed frame may have been class number 2800 in the AD20K dataset, but in our dataset we might be getting it label 3 because we only have 15 labels total. So what we're doing here is we're taking the original mask, which is this segmentation. So I'll call this the mask equivalently. So we're taking the mask and we're going through the old labels and the new labels, the mapping, and we're just seeing, okay, wherever I find a bedpost, knowing that I'm keeping bedpost, I'm going to assign it the new label. And that's kind of all that's going on here. The code is admittedly a bit dense, and the format that the AD20K dataset stores things in is not the easiest to work with. There's some bit shifting required. There's some pixel mask techniques required. If you are interested in seeing how we got to this point, you can follow the link here, and they have some code for use with the AD20K dataset. So I don't want to get into the weeds of exactly how this happens. I just want to let y'all know that there is like a little bit of encoding going on here, which is one of the reasons it's a little bit harder to work with the full AD20K dataset as is. It's usually nice to be able to get it converted at least as a subset, and then also converted into one of these two more popular formats, the COCO dataset or the Pascal VOC dataset. Next up, we have a function that we wrote, and that's just to detect if the mask is sparse. So if we picked a bedroom scene and for some reason there's almost entirely background in this scene, we want to kind of just toss it out. We figure it's not very useful for the model to overlearn what is a background and not learn enough what is a bedpost, what is a pillow, what is a chair. So that's just another aspect of the pre-processing that we're doing here. We've got a function that creates all of our directories. So the VOC format is directory structured. So we'll just create all the directories here and return those locations to the function that calls this one. And then lastly, we have the convert to VOC function. So this kind of runs everything end to end. And I think this one's high enough level that we can kind of talk about this in a little bit more detail. So again, we provided the source location for the AD20K dataset. We provided the destination, so where we are saving this VOC formatted dataset. We're specifying those things that I mentioned for the scenes, which ones we require, which ones we absolutely reject. And then a list of the labels that we want. So again, that's these tuples, and everything in the tuple gets combined into one class. So first, we're filtering the dataset by scene names. Next, we are creating these label mappings. So you'll know the textual label to the new ID. So when I say new ID, I mean the numerical label that we'll give it in the segmentation. So this pixel location is a chair. If a chair is given label 3, every chair pixel will be given label 3 in our converted data set. And similarly, this will be the correspondence from the original AD20K number encoding for that label to the VOC encoding of that label. So again, 2800 might become 3 in the case of the chair. We'll create the directories here, and then what we'll do from that point is we'll just iterate over every sample that matched. So again, this is the metadata is all the matching images. We'll iterate over those samples, and we'll create these VOC type segmentation masks. And I'll show you what those look like in just a second as well. And as long as those new masks are not sparse, as long as there is useful information in them by our metrics, we'll keep them and we'll store them where they belong according to this format. And then we'll keep going. And once we go through every sample that is relevant, we'll store those in a partition file. Again, this is specific to VOC. And we'll log where some of these things are being stored. Lastly, we'll store this label map just so a user that may not have seen this before can actually decode what does label 1 correspond to, what does label 2 correspond to. So if you look at the output here, you'll see quite a lot. And again, I didn't run this right now, but if you run this, you'll get the exact same results. So it'll tell you where the data set has been stored. It'll tell you how many instances were in the training and validation partition. So you'll see it's not a lot relative to the size of the AD20K dataset, which has around 20K samples. And that's good because we want to only keep the sample of the scenes that are relevant to us and only the classes that are relevant to us. And this label mapping is stored here. So that's all of the conversion code. And at that point, it's equivalent to any other VOC data set. Specifically for segmentation, this doesn't do classification or anything like that. This is just segmentation. And once you get a feel for how that's done, you'll have these images that if you run through a visualization program like what we're using, you'll be able to see the different labels here. So although you're seeing green, which has its own RGB code, just know that under the hood, the image has label, let's say 2 here for wall, has 3 here for bed frame, has 4 here for pillows, and so on. And we're actually going to be doing something very similar for COCO. But just so we're clear, the segmentation that I create here for VOC is a separate image. So just like AD20K has an image for the true image and a separate image for the segmentation, VOC does a very similar thing. This is illustrated slightly differently, but it is the same thing. COCO, on the other hand, is going to be very different. So if you're not familiar with the COCO format, what you need to know is that it does not use two separate images. Instead, what it does is it keeps one image, the source image stays. What changes is that instead of having a segmentation image, excuse me, you have a JSON file that encodes the polygons or the points enclosing a region that you are designating a certain class. So I may draw a square here or a rectangle here to bound this area, and all of that area will be encoded into the JSON file, and it'll correspond to the label door. So it's slightly different, and it's a little bit harder to work with just individually unless you have some utilities and scripts written up. So it's a little bit harder than the VOC dataset, but it is otherwise pretty nice in that there is so much support for this dataset. It can be a little bit smaller than the VOC dataset because you're not storing as many images. So let me show you what that looks like under the hood. So we have a function to create the COCO directories, just like we had a directory structure with VOC, we have one for COCO. We need to encode some information within the COCO dataset format. So some things are the image ID, which is a uniquely assigned ID for each image. We'll have the width and the height of the image stored. Some of these fields are just required for the format to be consistent, but we may not use them. So we don't have Flickr URLs, for example, or we don't have like a specific thing for date captured or license, but that's okay. This is the key. So we have a lot of things going on. And again, I don't want to dive too deep into the weeds because this is really our implementation of this same concept. You can come up with your own and it's totally fine. What I do want to point out is that we go through each image one by one. We identify where the pixels are that match a certain instance ID. So it may be wall number 1 of 3 walls. We'll look at all of those pixels and we'll decode what class does this belong to. And this happens in the VOC version as well, by the way. The only thing that the VOC version does not do is that it does not try to encode all of this as a polygon. And that's kind of the key with COCO. There's polygon encoding, which is designed to hopefully help save some disk space. So if your image is sparse and all the classes are mostly background, you kind of win here. There isn't much to encode. If you have a really dense image, maybe you have more to encode. So there's some trade-offs. But either way, this is kind of how the the COCO dataset format works. So it encodes the pixel locations like as a polygon and sticks that in a JSON file. And you and I can actually see the JSON files in a text editor. They may be a little bit too bulky for us to meaningfully do anything with, but they are there and they are available. And so we do this for every image. We take every image, we take every class that we're interested in from that image, and we encode as a polygon all of those pixel locations, and we stick it in the annotation for that image. So every single image has many different annotations, and each annotation is one polygon encoding one label with a certain bounding box covering that area. So we may not use all of these for our training and post-processing steps, but they are there just to be consistent with the data format. And then lastly, the convert to COCO function, which I showed y'all earlier, which specifies the exact same things as the convert to VOC. And it just runs the things that I mentioned above. So it also filters the AD20K dataset by scenes. It creates those label mappings. And it goes through and runs one image at a time. It has some metadata that it passes back and forth between functions. But again, that's specific to our implementation. That's not necessarily, that's not necessarily too important, as long as you guys can accomplish the same understanding the format. And that is really all of the conversion script. So obviously there's a lot baked in here, a lot that I glossed over. If you are interested, I do encourage you to explore it. But if you are not interested in getting into the weeds, just know that if you change the scene names here and the class labels here, you will get a data set of your choice. And you can go ahead and run this visualization down here and it'll do the same thing. It'll it'll take random samples from your new data set and kind of display them, whether you use the VOC version or the COCO version. Now, before we move on to stage 3, one thing that I want to point out is there is one other use case that you may have. Maybe you don't want to use the AD20K data set. Maybe you want to use your own data set. So it's very common that you might have collected pictures for your specific use case. Maybe you're doing quality assurance in a factory. So you may have collected images of car parts in your factory that you're trying to do quality assurance on. So you may have a lot of examples of good parts, bad parts, and so on. And maybe you want to do segmentation of some kind to identify deformations or anything. So if you want to use your own, we also have some starter code to kind of support that. So if you go into chapter 2, preprocessing, you'll find a directory called label me. And inside label me, we have some instructions for how to use a tool called label me. So label me is a graphical tool that pulls up one picture at a time and you draw the polygons yourself. So just like I mentioned how the COCO dataset format relies on polygons, you can, using your own dataset, specify those polygons. A team of y'all could maybe get through thousands of images in a day, for example. And you can draw a polygon and then say this is, for example, so what we have are cat images. So I'll just show you the cat images. You can specify here are the cat ears. So I would click here, 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 and here, and that would bound the polygon. And I would say this is a cat ear. And so in this directory, we just have some, we tell you how to install the tool. We tell you how to iterate over the images using some bash commands. And this is just because each image has to be annotated one by one. And this is just to automate the process a little bit. This is really good on Mac OS and Linux. I think you may have to change it very slightly for Windows. But let me just show you what the annotations look like. So I showed you the image. Now let me show you an annotation. So for image number 1, I have this JSON file. And this gives you an idea of how COCO works as well, by the way. So you'll see that the label I gave was ear. And the points that I clicked on are these pixel locations. You'll see they're more granular than just the pixel level. There may be some interpolation and so on. But you'll see that I clicked on quite a different number of locations for one ear. And then for the other ear, I also clicked on many, many points. I could have made them more simple. I could have made them more complex. But I just want to point out that label me is a great way to generate your own data set. And the output of it is that JSON file for each image. And lastly, if you run this script, which we provided here, we slightly modified it from what the author has in label me. This script, once you run it on your raw label me folder, will generate a fully COCO compatible data set. Let me actually show you that here. So I go into chapter 2, preprocessing. I'll go into label me, and I'll run the code. Well, actually, I've already run the code here. So you'll see COCO label me. You'll see that it looks exactly like the dataset format for COCO. So it has the images in separate folders. Train 2014 has all the training. Val 2014 has all the validation images. And you'll see these two JSON files that, again, encode everything we need to have like a fully working COCO dataset. So again, COCO is a dataset itself, but that data format can also be really useful in different ways. And so I didn't pull up the label me tool just because it's a bit difficult to work with and it takes some time to do those annotations. But if you follow any of these links here to label me, you'll be able to see how to get some of these things done. So this is what the tool looks like graphically. You'll just literally click on different aspects of the image to create those polygons, and you'll decide which class to assign them to. And with that, that's everything that I wanted to show for chapter 2 preprocessing. So again, in this chapter, we took the full AD20K dataset, we selected certain scenes, we selected certain classes, and we even decided which classes we want to combine. Once we specify all of those things, we decide if we want a COCO format dataset or a VOC formatted dataset. Both of them are fine. Both of them work really well in different ways. And we showed you how to convert to all of those. We also showed you a little bit of under the hood, how we're doing some of these things. But you'll have the code available at your disposal. Hopefully everything is documented well enough that there aren't too many questions about how some of these things work. We are about to take a break really soon, but I believe we'll do break and Q&A at the same time. But just know that the next stage after this will be chapter 3 and 4, which is going to be using this data set that we just generated, the COCO formatted 80/20K bedroom data set, and actually training a model to recognize those labels, and then seeing how well we can refine the results and what we can manage to do with just a few simple steps. So with that, I'll pass it back over to Cody, and thank you.
All right, thanks, Osama. So for everyone who's able to execute this code on their own machines, feel free to ask questions if you encounter any issues. We'll be monitoring this chat, so if you run into any problem, just type the problem you have and we'll try to solve it for you. And otherwise, we'll see you back at 12:33 in about 10 minutes for a short for our second half. And then I'm gonna share my screen and make sure if you have the Colab notebook opened, if you could run the first 2 cells to get the installation started during the break, that would be great. So when we come back, we'll have it ready to go. All right, I'll see you guys in 10 minutes. All right, welcome back, everyone. We're gonna give just one more minute for folks to trickle in. All right, we're gonna get started with the third part of the tutorial, which is training and testing the segmentation model. And Eddine, stage is yours.
Yes. Okay. All right. So I will share my screen. Okay, can you see my screen? Yes. Okay, awesome. So my name is Eddine. I'm a senior data scientist at the luxury retail company LVMH, Louis Vuitton Moët Hennessy, currently located in Paris. But I was working with the Home Depot team as a consultant data scientist. So basically today I'm going to present the KDD tutorial for the collab implementation of detection. So I would like to give you like a high-level overview on detection. Basically, detection is an open source object detection toolbox based on Python. It's part of the Open Lab project developed by the Multimedia Laboratory. It is faster in training and inference than many other code bases like Facebook, Detectron, Masker CNN, Benchmark, and SampleDet. Basically, they have decomposed the detection framework into different components, and one can easily construct a customized object detection framework by combining different modules. It also supports training on multiple GPUs. It supports multiple datasets. So what Osama presented, Coco, Pascal, XML style. And basically, it has almost every state-of-the-art model pre-configured, which will definitely save you a lot of time. Saying that, we will show you the collab version of chapter 3 and 4 for our tutorial. So in this part, we will basically show you how to execute the segmentation inference with the detection detector object. Next, we will train a new segmentation model detector with a new customized subset dataset for coming from ADE 20K dataset. And finally, we will run the model inference and image post-processing later with Cody. Okay, saying that, basically, I think like everyone already started to see the collab version, but if you not, so you just have to click on tutorial, collab chapter 3, training collab, copy this link, go to collab, and then click GitHub, search for the training collab, and you will find it over here. Okay, awesome. So first of all, we will basically upload different packages. So we first need our NVCC, which is a compiler by NVIDIA. So just to check the version. So here we are working with version 10.1. And we also need the GCC compiler for our C++. Basically, we have the version. Okay, so we have version 7.5, And then we need to install different other dependency of PyTorch. We also need the MMCV. So basically, MMCV is a foundational Python library for computer vision research, and it supports many research projects. One of them is MM detection, which is the one that we are going and install it later over here. So you can see also we need to install Pillow because we found some bugs that need to be solved. So you need to install Pillow version 7.00. Okay. I think the installation will be smoothly because I already installed all these packages. Next, we have also to install the existing PyCoco tool. So basically for the PyCoco tool, so as Osama explained, so Coco is a large image dataset designed for the object detection. So PyCoco tool package provides a Python API that assists in loading, parsing, and visualizing the annotation in Coco. Okay, I think it's working already. So we just have to install this again because I already run it. So you will see it over here. So basically, then we need to import Torch Vision and check the version of Torch. Also MMDet and MMCV, and it's basically already working. And then we will start with inference with MM detection segmentation with the mask RCNN detector. Okay, so the idea here, first of all, we need to make the inference, so without any training. And MM detection offer you to use any model that you want. Basically, we have here different configuration that you can use from mask RCNN, but also other configuration, Cascadier CNN, mask RCNN, any other model that you want to use. And with masker CNN, so we will use masker CNN Air 100, so ResNet 100. And you can also check like other backbones. So we have faster CNN, RPN, SSD, Retina, Cascader CNN, mask scoring CNN. So you can basically play around different heads and different also model. Saying that, we can now basically use our, so I will close this and this, you already have it. Okay, so we will use the pre-trained model, so which is saved over here, as well as the configuration from the masker CNN ResNet 100 FPN Coco dataset. So FPN sent for the feature pyramid network. So basically the idea here that it combines low resolution, semantically strong feature with high resolution via top-down pathway and lateral connections. So we just have to basically load our MM detection API that will contain inference detection, init detector, and another function that will allow us to show the results. We are going to use our masker CNN 100. I think I have it over here somewhere. Okay, we don't have it. Okay, yeah. So we have it here. So you can see that basically in the in this configuration, we have like multiple parameters that you can play around. So you can change your backbone with ResNet, with any other backbone that you need, and also play around the parameter of the backbone, but also the neck. So here we have the feature pyramid network. We can also play around the RPN head for the regional proposed network. And we can basically play around the ROI head bbox heads for the bounding box, the mask if you are computing basically segmentation, etc., etc. But also we can play around the training parameters. So here we have the number of the threshold, number of epochs, etc. So basically it's like really configurable, and you can play around these parameters in order to tune your model. Okay, and we also have to have the checkpoint, which is our the weight after the training, after basically from the pre-trained model. So when we run this, okay, so okay, wait a moment. It's working. I hope so. Yes. Okay. Also, we just have to test with any image that you want. So here we are going to test with this garden image and run the inference. And finally, use the show results pyplot in order to check the final results. Also, you can specify your score threshold. So you will have basically score threshold on how the model trusts his prediction. And here you can basically get different prediction, but only based on the class of the first pre-trained model. So the first pre-trained model was being trained on bench, share, cars, etc. And it was very well detected and also very well segmented with absolutely high probability. So here we have 73%, 99%. So it's quite a strong model. Next, we want to train our model as well. So to train a new detector, there are usually 3 things to do. So basically to use a new dataset or support new dataset. So here we are using our subset of ADE20K dataset, modify the configuration file with the value that you want to, or the parameters that you want to use, and finally implement a new dataset. Okay, so and finally train your model. Sorry. So there are 3 ways to support a new dataset in detection. Either you use COCO format, or recognize the data into middle format, or implement a new dataset from scratch. Basically, we recommend to use COCO format or to recognize the dataset into middle format. And so I think in chapter 2 we offered an example to convert both ADE20K data and label me generated custom data into the format of existing dataset like COCO, VOC, etc. So now what we are going to do is we will download our data first of all. So we will download it from this link and save it into KDD final.zip. We will unzip our files and then install tree, and basically we will put basically on bedroom scene COCO. Okay, so let's run this cells. I think it will not take a lot of time. Yeah. All right. I think I already ran this, but yeah, let's see. Okay, so you can see all the images in the train 2014, and as well as basically the validation, I think. Yeah, you'll have also the validation over here. Next, you can see that we have basically 850 files. And we can visualize one of them. So basically, we will pick one of the files to visualize and to see the images. Next, we will implement ADE20K based on the COCO dataset. So the ADE20K bed here will be an inherent or a subclass of COCO dataset. Okay, so basically, we just have to specify the classes. Okay, so we already ran this. So we already have ADE20K here, so but you can specify with another name. then we will modify the configuration file. Okay, so as I said, this is how it looks, the configuration file, but also you can modify like each parameter independently using the MM detection API. So basically you can change the configuration, data route, data type. So you can see here that we are using the same for validation and test, because we are not going to use the test, but only the validation. Also, you can choose from which weights you can start. So you can start from a random weight, but also from a pre-trained model. So here we are using the previous pre-trained model that we use for the inference. But also you can specify where to save your files, learning rate, what is the matrix. Here we are choosing the mean average precision, the interval, the seed, and as well as the total epoch. So here we are going just to train with one epoch. And you can see here that we are going to start the training in here. Okay, so after specifying all these configuration files, we can start directly. One moment. So yeah, I think I didn't read. And it start running. Okay, so we will start basically with one epoch. I will just show you the log, which will give us a basic understanding of the training process and know how well the detector is running with different metrics for the bebox, for the classifier, for the accuracy, and basically for the region proposal network, the ROI. It will take some time. So basically we will have 840 steps. And you can see here that the model started from the first step to have an accuracy of 84%, because we are based on the pre-trained model. And with a good loss classifier, RPNB box, also nice value. So basically you will see all the logs and you can check your training while you are basically waiting for the final results. We will not wait for the model until the end. So basically for that, we already trained the model for 18 epochs. Okay, so it takes a lot of time, but we prepared that for you. So that's why we have the checkpoint already. So we need to save this file in checkpoint epoch 18, and also the configuration file that we use it. So we just have to download it. And then, okay, I think this is not already done. Yeah. So after downloading the epoch 18 and the configuration file, we just have to basically run our modeling by specifying the checkpoint 18 and the configuration file 18 that we already trained, and pick an image, and finally show the final results. And you can see here the model was able to classify the beds, the floor, the ceiling, the wall, the windows, with quite, basically most of them are higher than 50% of threshold, which is quite good for, and you have to know something, and this is also another pros to use ADE 20K dataset. Sometimes it's quite challenging to segment all these walls or the ceiling, even with label me. So the ADE 20K dataset will help you to get all the segmentation more quickly with high accuracy with a model like MM detection using Cascadier CNN or Masker CNN with a ResNet backbone. So saying that, I think now we will move to Cody. So Cody, Yes.
So is everybody able to get the training started? If you have any trouble starting the training, please let me know or let everyone know in the chat, and we'll try to debug it for you. But then basically, once you get the training started, you can achieve the same result with our model in 18 epochs.
So don't hesitate if anyone have any question.
Okay, so
yeah, it will take some time. Yes.
Yeah, that will take some time. So if you haven't run the installation before it will take, depending on your internet speed, might take like 10 minutes. All right, if no one has any more questions, we'll go on to the post-processing part. Is everyone able to follow, or should we give people more time to make sure the installation is there? So as long as you have the installation, you could have, you can download the data, the model that we trained and run the testing. Okay, so we got a question. Have you tried this method on time series data to segment noise from data? That's an interesting question. No, we have not. If you guys have anything to offer, Eddine.
Yeah, basically, are you saying that you will transform the time series into an image, basically an image of time series, and then you can detect or segment? Okay, yeah. We didn't try it before, but you can use it. But basically, you need to have the segmentation of some noise before for the training. You can use it by label me. So if you have some images of time series data, you can label the position of the noise, and you can basically use the same techniques that we use it now. But in that case, you will have one class or two classes, the background and the noise. Okay, I will check any publication on this topic.
Okay, so is everyone able to download the model that we trained and run the results? We're gonna get started with post-processing just a little bit.
Cody, can you share the notebook again?
All right. Okay, awesome. So if you're able to train the model, you don't have to finish all of the training, and you can just stop that cell from running and then download the model that we trained for 18 epochs. But you can also leave it running if you want. It will just prevent you from executing the code following that. All right, so if you're able to load the model and then run the test on the test image that we provided. So this is what we're gonna do for post-processing. So as you may know, some of these segmentation results that you get from the raw model isn't perfect. A lot of times, if you look at the floor or if you look at like even the picture frame or the window, you sort of get all of these jagged boundaries that you notice it's definitely not perfect. So for whatever your downstream application that you want to build, you want to get maybe like a more refined result, which will get you like a better boundary or like a better segmentation, so you could put it into production. So in this refinement module, we're going to introduce a few techniques that you can leverage to basically make your final segmentation look better. And we're gonna so first we're gonna download this image from our website. So this is just the Home Depot website. And then what you're gonna see is that we loaded this image and then we run the segmentation model that we just built. And you get all these segmentation results. And then the next step is basically, I'm gonna enlarge the screen a little bit. It seems a little bit small. Okay. So the next step is basically we're trying to visualize what we're getting in this segmentation. And we want to get the segmentation corresponding to the particular item that we want to post-process. So right here, we're first showing the class dictionary of all the classes that we trained on in our model. So this is within the model itself. And then you can see it corresponds to the data set that we built in chapter 2. We have a total of 15 classes. And then as you can see, what we're doing here is that we're filtering the segmentation result by a confidence level. So right here, we're ensuring that every final segmentation result we're returning has a confidence of larger than 0.5. And then from there, what we're doing is that we're sorting the segmentation by the confidence level for that for the segmentation results that we got. And then what we're doing is that we can get the corresponding result for a particular class. So here we're just getting one of the results for the painting picture frame. So if you look at here, this is what we have. And then next, we're gonna refine the results on that picture frame. So what we did here is that within this, for this segmentation, for this raw segmentation, we're performing an OpenCV function. So the OpenCV module is also a computer vision tool that is widely used. It has a lot of functions for processing different images, such as finding the contours for an area that you defined, such as edge detection, for example, if you just want to detect like the edges in this image, you'll find some of these edges along the window lines or the, the cabinet. And then there are others that you can explore. But then here, what we're using is this function called find contours. So what this function does is that it takes that mask and then it tries to find a contour along that mask. So basically drawing a boundary along that segmentation mask. So if we didn't post-process this, you get like sort of a jagged boundary like this one that's showing right here. But then what we're doing for post-processing is that here we define a function called get approximate corner. So what this does is that we pass in the raw contour, and then we pass in coefficient, which specify how much strength we're trying to approximate that contour. And then we're specifying a number of corners that we want the final segmentation to have. So in this case, you know already that usually your picture frame would have a total of 4 corners. So you give it, so you pass in 4 for the number of corners. And then I'll show you what exactly this function does in just a little bit. But then finally, what you get for the final segmentation is this one right here, which shows that you only have 4 corners, and it's basically a rectangle. It's not exactly a rectangle if you enlarge the picture maybe by 1,000 times, but it's basically a quadrangle, and it has 4 corners. So I'm gonna show you what this function does real quick. So it basically takes in the hull is the contour, the raw contour that we passed in. And then it basically enters this while loop. What it does is that it uses this initial coefficient strength that you give it to try to approximate it. And then in that approximation process, if you get a coefficient strength, if you get the corner if you get an approximated contour that has more corners than what you wanted it to have, then you increase the approximation strength. So basically you increase that strength to lower the number of corners until you get the number of corners you want. So as you can see here, if the final approximated contour has less corners, then you would decrease the coefficient strength. So that's what basically this function does. And finally, you would get the desired number of approximate contours that you would want. This will not always work, because in some cases you might specify a number of corners that's basically impossible. And then in that case, you might have to adjust the number of desired contours that you might have, or break out of the while loop if after a while you still won't get the desired number of corners you want. So that's basically what we arrived at here, is this green box that delineates the segmentation contour. So anyone has any questions for this part, please post in the chat. Okay, awesome. Feel free to ask more if you encounter any issues. And then following this image, what we're going to do is we're going to try a different approximation method next. So before that, what we're doing is that we're using this function called get approximate contour to get our final sort of nice bounding box for that segmentation. And then right now, what we want to do is, well, we're using this min area rectangle. So this is a different function that will basically allow you to construct a rectangle that surrounds your raw segmentation that has the minimum area. So if you think about it, it basically constructs like a lowest, the closest, tightest boundary around your segmentation contour while ensuring that that boundary is a rectangle. So sometimes you would want to use this function instead, as in some cases you might have like exactly a rectangle object in your image. And then sometimes you might not. Like you might know it has four corners, but it's not a rectangle in that image. We're going to go on to this next example here to demonstrate why sometimes we would use this function instead of this function. So, so this is another image that we loaded from our website. And then same thing we do is we run the segmentation model on this image. And then as you can see here, we get this window right here and this picture frame right here that you're basically trying to approximate, if you want to get a refined segmentation for these two, it won't be a rectangle, as you can see, but it will still have four corners in the image. So this is when we're going to apply this function instead of this minimum area rectangle function. So again, if you execute these two cells, you'll get basically, first we select the segmentation corresponding to the window. So this time we pass in the window class, and then we get the raw segmentation, and we pass it into this function over here, the get approximate corner function, and then return the approximated boundary. And as you can see now, it gets the correct boundary for this image, which is not a rectangle, but a quadrangle. As you can see, it's still not perfect because our segmentation isn't perfect. And just as a little exercise, if folks, you want to try to approximate this picture frame instead using the same function, we will leave that as a little homework for you to play around with this notebook. So to give you a hint, what you want to do is you want to change this line here, basically to pass in a different class to get your desired raw segmentation. And then everything else will pretty much stay the same. And then you'll be able to visualize the nice boundary that you drew on this picture frame.
Cody, is it possible to improve the segmentation itself based on this function? Not the
based on the extraction itself?
Yes.
So there are definitely multiple ways to do that. So, so one way is that you can fine tune your model. So for example, if we already trained this data set on like train this model on the 8020K data set, but then you observe that sometimes because I'm gonna open this to demonstrate this better. So for example, sometimes you're getting, you're training your model on these refrigerators. As you can see, these are really old refrigerators. Some of them are newer, but a lot of them are like older refrigerators. So what you can do is that you can fine tune a model that you already trained on the same class, but with a different data set. So you could provide the model with additional data that maybe you built from scratch using label me or some other sources. And then using the conversion tool that we provided in chapter 2, you can convert that data set into the same COCO format. And then you can fine tune your model basically on your original model that you train, and you get hopefully better results for those specific classes that you want to improve on. So that's definitely the main way that you can try to improve your model, especially you know what's going on, and after you run some tests to see that what your model is having trouble with. But then if you just want to do fine-tuning, do post-processing on the model itself, on the results itself, these are some of the easier way around by using such as OpenCV tools to basically bound these segmentations better, and then maybe approximate those raw segmentations into better delineated segmentation outlines. Yeah. So if everyone was able to run these successfully, we're gonna show you now. Basically, we're gonna use this additional time to let you know, to go back to the desktop version and show you the VM version, which will enable you to train locally on your own machine. We're gonna introduce some of the areas that we didn't cover just now. So in the GitHub link, if you go back to chapter 2, so before that, in the Colab version of the tutorial, we're able to basically load the image and then build our custom dataset, and then change the config files and run the build the customized models ourselves. So what if, say, you want to try a different model, or a different config? So on the VM version, it's much easier to do that, just because it's you don't have to deal with all the different file paths on the Google Colab. So what we can do is right here, we provided some methods to, go to chapter 3 is where we'll have that setup documentation for you. So basically, same thing after you get everything installed. What you can do is, so as you have prepared and downloaded your dataset first, we can go in to change the dataset file first. So this is basically the first step before you train any segmentation model using MM detection if you're using a custom dataset. So so basically, after we build this dataset, we're gonna go into this directory here to add this file. So this file is new. We just added this file, so you can see it's the exact same content as the Colab version which we introduced here. So in the Colab version, we're just registering this class in real time. And then on your own VM machine, you would want to add this file in your dataset directory. Basically copy the same content and paste it. And it will basically inherit the COCO dataset. So this is generally the preferred way to build your own dataset. So if you have a custom dataset, you can start from scratch and write all the different functions for retrieving your labels, for visualizing the results. But if you just inherit the COCO dataset, all those functions will be already available to you, and you won't need to add anything else in that file besides these these newer classes that you generated. So after you create this file, all you need to do is in this init.py file, you can import the new dataset file that you created on your desktop VM version. And then basically you just add that to the list of files that they are, list of dataset formats that they already have. So is this dataset file part clear to everyone? Yeah, so basically this is how you add your own dataset. And then finally, before you start training, you want to change and modify the config files that you want to use so that your config files, one, correspond to the correct model configurations that you choose to use. And then two, you want your config files to point to the correct directories for the datasets that you prepared, and then also point to the correct directories that you want to output your models. So what you want to do here is that first you want to check out, as Eddine showed in his presentation already, the MM detection documentation has some ways for you to basically change your config files, but then we're going to give you a very simple way to do that. So basically all you need to do is that you find the config file that you want to use. It's taking a minute to load. Basically you want to find the config files that you want to use, and then you basically change those files. So first we choose the model. So there's a model zoo, and you can choose, for example, in our example, we choose the REST2net as a backbone and mask RCN as a model. And then you could change these backbones and models like this. So we first find the corresponding config file to this configuration here. So this is the exact config file that corresponds to the REST2net backbone and the master RCN model. So we find it in this config file directory. And then we basically open that file and we can see what these files are related to. So detection, the current version has a really nice directory structure, which basically it's like it uses some base model files, and then they have customized more high-level configuration files on top of it. So this is like the highest level configuration file. And if you open that file, you'll be able to see this line on the top. So on the very top of this file, you can see base. So basically what this base is pointing to is that it's a base model file that other configurations are built upon. So if we want to modify this file, we can basically just go into this file instead. And then when we open this file, we'll see more base files. So you can see it's like a layered structure for those config files. So it makes it really easy for you if you don't want to modify everything for a specific configuration, but you just want to modify, for example, the data set or the model or the backbone alone. And then as we can see here in this file, we find all these 4 base files. And then for these 4 base configuration files, all we need to change here is the base model file and the schedule file. So the schedule file allows you to change the number of epochs you want to train, and the base model file allows you to specify some of the model parameters. And then the COCO detection.py file is basically your base dataset configuration file. And in that base dataset configuration file is where you can change the path to your own datasets. So what we did here is that we prepared, so you already would have downloaded these configuration files in the, in this version that we prepared, we already prepared the zip data files for you to, the zip config files for you to rewrite all these configuration files. But if you want to change it yourself, you can also do that. It's really simple. As long as you track from the top of your configuration to the bottom and change these base files, you'll be good to go. And then, so here we just summarize the places that we changed in each of these configuration files. So you have the exact details of what you want to do if you're training on this data set that we prepared. So we modify the number of classes to 15. And then we change the total epochs to the desired number of epochs that we want to train. And in the COCO detection file, we modify our data root, data set type, and data dictionaries, etc. So just briefly going over back here. So this basically corresponds to these config modification file modification lines that we introduced in the collab version. So as you can see here, we're basically importing this config object, and then we're modifying the data root, the dataset type, and then the training, the validation directories, and then we're also modifying the number of epochs, which we set here to just to 1 for you to train quickly. Yeah, but then basically these are, so in the collab version, we're just loading this config object, and then we change its associated parameters. While in the VM version, what you do is you change these files, and then the model, when it starts to train, it loads all these information into a dictionary and then pass that config information for the model to use. So yeah, so this is basically what you want to do if you're running the VM version. And feel free to ask us any questions if you try it out later. And you can leave us messages in the Wova app, and we'll try to answer if we see them. So that basically concludes our tutorial today. So I know a lot of folks here don't have a GPU machine, so that's why we prepared this Colab version, which allows you to basically train it without a GPU and using your own data set. The MM detection website also has a Colab version of the tutorial, but it uses its own toy data set that you can also play around with. But then here we just wanted to give you the option to be able to do everything by yourself, starting from the data set training, the data set preparation, pre-processing, and then loading your own data set configurations, and then being able to train the model. So yes, that's basically what we have for you today. And then all the resources are available on our GitHub page again. So you can download the slides here, which Matthew presented in the introduction. We didn't get a chance to cover all the generative models at the end, but feel free to follow up with us if you see any interested topics. And with that, we're gonna conclude our tutorial. Thank you for all the attendees, especially if you're in a different time zone. If you, we're really happy that you were able to attend it. And then thank you to our presenters, Osama, Matthew, and Eddine. Thanks for the hard work for putting it together. And feel free to check out our information on Connect on LinkedIn, and also just to let you know that our Home Depot booth is open. And if you're interested, visit our booth to learn about what we do. And also, if you're open to any job opportunities, feel free to drop by. And thank you again, everyone. We'll see you maybe next year. So Matthew's video presentation will be available after the conference, and we'll be sharing that. I think through the VOA app is where we'll be posting the videos, but the conference chairs should have more information coming soon. Yeah. And thank you again for joining. We're gonna leave this channel open. This chat open if you have any further question for the next maybe 10 to 20 minutes. We're just going to be online if you have any questions, but feel free to hop off if you are finished with everything. Thank you.
Yeah, Cody, I want just to say something.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm not part of the team of the Home Depot now, but really had a great experience at the Home Depot, which opened to me many opportunities. So if you can join the team, you will be working on real life application, design it for production, and most importantly, working with a great team. So this is what I want to say.
All right, so we got another question from Yushi. Eddine, if you can elaborate on the time series datasets.
Yes, so the idea is just you have to change the time series dataset, which is usually on tabular data, into an image representation. So you will convert the time series into an image dataset, and then you need to use some labels because it's difficult to find some dataset with labeled images, which will help you to detect anomalies or noise. And basically, you can use label me if you know what are the anomalies in your time series, if it is sales forecast or weather forecast or whatever it is. And finally, you can use detection in order to detect these anomalies using any segmentation model or even a classification model that will tell you if this time series contain anomaly or not. So it will be more classification oriented, because with detection, you can use segmentation of basically of objects, but also you can use classification of videos, or classification of time series, or even classification of images. So it's really, so you can use also spectrum, as Al-Muhi said. So
we can unmute folks who want to ask questions as well. So if you want to be unmuted, I'm just gonna unmute you if you ask a question. So feel free to.
Yeah, that will be better.
Yeah, I haven't figured out exactly how.
You have to click on him and then unmute him.
Yeah, check.
Okay, I don't know how, but
Okay, yeah, I think I figured out how to do that. So how much do you need for training? How many images?
Yeah, training size.
So can you repeat your questions?
How many, what is the size of your training image? How many?
Yeah. That's another challenge, because if you are going to label it manually, it will take some time. It depends on your difficulties. So if the anomalies are very different from each other, then you really need more data set, like around 1,000. But if the anomalies or the noise, it's always similar to each other, like you have a pattern there, you may need 20 to 30 image. And then in detection, you can use sort of augmentation. So it's already implemented there. So you can do all this kind of rotation, flipping, changing of colors, etc. And this will help you to gain more images without any expenses, like without wasting a lot of time on labeling the data. So it really depends on your problem and the class that you want to detect.
So is the labeling done automatically? Is there any tool for labeling, or do you have to do it by hand?
Yeah, so as I said, so this is the challenge. You need to do it at hand, at least for 30 to 40 examples. Otherwise, it will be kind of challenge, because the model, you need to give him some target, like you need to give him at least a class. So do you have like a class if this time series contain a noise or anomaly or no? Do you have any information? Which information do you have? Like, what is the data, and what could be the final target that you have, like the final label?
So the number of classes equals the number of items you are trying to segment, right? Like
absolutely. So I think you have like one. I think you have one label. Like, is it noise or no? Or do you have like other type of noise?
Yeah, even the data can be divided into different types of data. So I may have more than 2 classes.
Yeah, so usually you will have 2 classes. Either for the segmentation, you will have noise or background. Background, which is the usual time series that you had, which is not noise. And even for the demo that we did, we also have the background. But it is like a number of class plus 1. The plus 1 represent always the background, which is a class that we don't know the name. It's the background, you know. For example, the tree, we don't want to classify it. It will be then classified as a background, because every object need to get a class. Even something empty need to be classified as background. So in your case, you need to understand what is the noise. So first of all, which data, because I don't know the data that you had. You have like some type of time series with labeled data saying this contain noise or no. Do you have this or no?
Yeah, I do. I have, for example, an earthquake data. So this is a primary wave, and the rest is different kinds of waves. So if I'm interested in the primary wave, that's my data, and the rest is my noise.
Yeah, I understand your problem now. Did you check a Kaggle dataset? There is a Kaggle competition on, I will send it to you right now, on earthquake.
Okay.
It's really amazing. And they are basically implementing a huge of many solutions, either with a recurrent neural network, so where you have the time series, or with CNN models. So I think the name of the competition, yeah, this one. So it's quite interesting competition, because also they need to predict if there is any earthquake that will happen in the future, so which is the noise, basically. And this will help you a lot. So basically, one of the solutions that they have is a CNN model, or feature selection, like traditional feature selection, or CNN model. So they are converting it to spectrogram, and then based on the spectrogram, you will have your analysis extracted from there. So I will basically share it with you, and you can check it and check like different solution over there. So I will send you the competition, but I will send you the notebook inside the competition in order to be able to check all the solution done by Kagglers.
That's excellent. Thank you so much. So the labeling, you said the labels have to be numbers, right? No text.
I think it's better to check the label in this competition, because the label is, these contain like a huge labeled data on earthquake. And I just forget like what was exactly, I think the label was basically a padding. So basically they took, for example, 50 seconds, and they will see if in these 50 seconds, if there is any earthquake in that signals, okay? And then they move forward another 50 seconds and see if there is any earthquake, another 50 seconds. So it's like sliding window, and each sliding window will contain a target. And this target is either there is earthquake or no, okay? And the model need to understand, based on the behavior of different signals, need to predict if this signal contain any earthquake.
All right, thank you so
much. I think it will help you a lot in your problem.
Yeah. So there's a $50,000 prize.
Yeah, but it's already done, so you cannot win.
Okay. All right, thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Ayadi.
Yeah. Any other questions, or there is already 30% here?
Yeah, feel free to let us know if you have any trouble running any of the code as well.
Any question about working at Home Depot or something?
Yeah, or those questions, feel free to ask too. But yeah, we're just gonna be on chat for.
I have a question for the working for the Home Depot.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
I have a friend. He was about to finish his PhD in environmental science, mostly physics. But he's currently working as a low-level Home Depot worker. So is there any scholarship or assistantship Home Depot can provide for him?
Sorry, could you repeat your question? I think your sound is a little bit.
I have a friend. He's working for Home Depot as a salesperson, but he is in a PhD program in environmental science, environmental physics program at, I think it's the University of Idaho. So does Home Depot give any scholarship or assistantship, for him to finish in, maybe he might change his focus to data analytics? Is there any?
So that's actually might be a question for our HR reps. So if you visit the booth, you can chat with them, and that's definitely a good question for them.
Okay.
But excuse me, but Osama here, who was actually working with us as a contractor, so he's moving on to a PhD in USC this fall. So yeah, but he's been with us for the past couple months as a contractor. So that's definitely a possibility too. And I definitely know another one of my friends who used to get sort of like a not a scholarship, but sort of like he works and is doing his PhD at the same time. So it's definitely a possibility. So it's not a scholarship, but you have to like sort of work at the same time.
Okay. Thanks so much.
No problem.
I will answer, can I use this for unsupervised classification? So first of all, if your class is already included in the pre-trained model, so if it is one of the class of the dataset trained in the beginning in the pre-trained model, you can use it as unsupervised model because you are not training anything like we did in the collab version. We didn't train anything, but we were able to make inference using the pre-trained model. But also you can tune your model with few images, like only 10 images. So based on the pre-trained model, you can use you can basically you can retrain your model again based on the pre-trained model, based on the checkpoint file, using few images. So you don't have to start from scratch. If you agree with me, Claudia.
Yeah, exactly. So Eddine brought up a good point. So so you can definitely so there's a lot of pre-trained models that you can leverage to basically just provide like a few images, and it will improve pretty rapidly based on my experience. If you just provide like a similar class but then with like a different style, it improves really quickly. Yeah, you're welcome. Document segmentation. So I think for document segmentation, you would want to use a text-based model instead.
I mean, have a document as an image, just take a photo of it, and it may be like a structured document.
Sorry, could you repeat?
So I mean, take a picture from the document. So instead of sending it to OCR and do any text-based model, just consider document as an image. And that document may have some structured format itself, some like a tables, I don't know, images. So using these models just to, do segmentation on top of that.
I see what you mean. Yes, that's definitely a possibility too. So I guess the idea is that you just have to extract the images from the document and then basically run segmentation models and try to obtain the classes and build like maybe a class distribution for the images in your document and then classify your document based on that distribution. So that's my take on it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Interesting questions. Okay. So applying this to satellite images is definitely will require you to obtain some labeled data sets. So for example, there are many ways to create these data sets. So one way is you can have like use some human labeling tools like Mechanical Turk from Amazon or Label Me. Basically crowdsourced tools to help you get those labeled data sets rapidly. But there are some additional ways too. So so you could use public data set. Yeah, Eddine provided a good data set too. So you could use a way to generate like artificial data sets. So that's a big area in image in computer vision right now, which is because these labors are so intensive and expensive. People have been figuring out ways to generate artificial data sets that basically just rapidly produce a large amount. And you can use those to train a model as well. And in addition, I would say that you might be able to, find something in AD20K, certain classes that might be of use to you. For example, because AD20K is such a huge data set, there are so many different classes of objects and so many different scenes that you could potentially use. For example, they even have like, I think airport, yeah, so they even have these kind of images where it's, it's not normal to find in other data sets. But that's somewhere that you can potentially look to find those data sets as well. Yeah, but there are a lot of works in generating these data sets either by hand or artificially to help you build the downstream application and the customized model for yourselves. So I posted the link to the image browser for AD20K if you're interested in finding some of the materials that you might need.
By the way, in that browser, you can search for object, but also for scene. So,
yeah, so there are different names for each of the objects you might find. Some of them are more accurate than others. So this is why we also had this pipeline for you to basically like combine some of these classes for your needs. If you say if those are too specific and you're just looking to like have like an overall class that encompasses those that more granular smaller classes that you might have. Yeah. So if you remember, what we did here is we basically combined a lot of these classes together to forge a more systematic data set. All right, what do you think, Ayadi? I think we can conclude here.
yes, we can conclude.
All right, thanks again, everyone, for attending this tutorial. Feel free to follow through all of the materials that we prepared, build your own segmentation models, and ask questions additionally if you have. Matthew and I will be giving a short presentation in 40 minutes at our Home Depot booth. If you're interested, we can answer more questions on what about this tutorial and also about what it's like to work at our company. And we're gonna conclude. Thank you again. Bye-bye.
Ciao.